right, so we are starting off with finding missing sides with trig ratios. Okay, so once again, your calculator is going to automatically go to degree mode. So make sure that it is in degree mode. Now, what we are going to be doing is we are going to be solving for x. Okay, and we are going to round to the nearest tenth. When you round to the nearest tenth, how many decimal places is that?
2.
1.
1. My bad.
Okay, so we are going to be applying SOHCAHTOA in order to solve these problems. What does the S stand for? Sine. What does the C stand for? Cosine. And T stands for tangent. What does the O stand for? Opposite. The H? And the A? Adjacent. Okay, so we're going to use this to help us solve for x. Now, in number 1, notice the angle that we are given is this 28. What would I label this side?
Opposite.
That is exactly correct. I'm going to label this opposite. What do I label the 19? Hypotenuse. Because remember, the hypotenuse is always going to be opposite of the right angle. And then in this case, what would I label this side? Adjacent, because it is right next to the angle. Now, in order to solve for x, I need to figure out which trig function do I use. Well, I got an x and a 19, so I'm not even using this side. So if I am given the opposite and the hypotenuse, do I use sine, cosine, or tangent? Sine, because it's giving me the opposite and the hypotenuse. So what I'm going to write is sine of, what is the angle measure? 28. Okay, so sine of whatever your angle is has to equal, and my ratio is going to be opposite over hypotenuse. So what is the value for opposite? X over, what's the value for hypotenuse? 19. Okay, now, if I were to say, how do you write 3 as a fraction? What would you say? 3 over 1. So what you're going to do this side is you're going to put this over 1. And so how do I solve for x now? Cross multiply. So we're going to take these two and multiply, and then we're going to take those two and multiply. What is 1 times x? X or 1x, either one of those are acceptable. And then in this case, you're going to have sine of 28 times 19. And so in Desmos, I want you to put sine of 28 times 19. Okay, so this is where you're going to put this in Desmos. Make sure you are multiplying. And we are going to once again round to the nearest tenth. And so x is going to equal 8.9. That's your answer. That is easy. All right. Any questions? Let's continue. I did sine of 28 times 19, not 28 times 19. So you have to make sure you push that sine button first. Okay. Then number 2, here I have the angle. What do I label this side? Opposite. What do I label the 32?
Hypotenuse.
Is it the hypotenuse or adjacent? It is adjacent, because the hypotenuse is going to be opposite of the 90-degree angle. Now, do I need the hypotenuse right now?
Yes.
No, because there's a 32 and an x over here. There is nothing on this side. Okay? So if I have adjacent and opposite, is that going to be a sine, cosine, or tangent? If I have adjacent and opposite, it's the TOA. Exactly. It has an O and an A, so those match O and A. So in this case, I'm going to be dealing with tangent. And then what's my angle measure? 41 equals, now I'm going to do, if it's TOA, which one has to go first? Opposite over adjacent. So I'm going to set it up as x over 32. And now, to make this the proportion, I need to put this over 1. And now to solve, we are going to cross multiply. So 1x equals tangent of 41 times 32. Oops. So you're in Desmos, you are going to type in tangent of 41 and then times 32. And we're going to round to the nearest tenth, which will give us 27.8. That is correct. Any questions so far? Typically, the hardest part is making sure you label correctly. If you do not label correctly, then you're going to probably use the wrong trig function. So let's look at 3. Okay. So for number 3, our angle of 21 is over here. What do I label the x? Adjacent, because it is next to my angle. What do I label the 26? The hypotenuse. Okay. Do I need to label this side if I don't have anything there? You can if you want to. It is considered the opposite, but you're not going to use it because there's nothing there. So if I am looking at just the 2 sides that they provided me, I'm dealing with adjacent and hypotenuse. Is this considered a sine, cosine, or tangent? Cosine, okay? I have an adjacent and hypotenuse. So I'm going to take the cosine of, what's my angle? 21 equals my adjacent, which is x, over my hypotenuse, which is 26. What do I put this over? 1. And we are going to cross multiply. So I'm going to do 1 times x and cosine of 21 times 26. So that will give me 1x equals cosine of 21 times 26. And x equals 24.3. All right, so for number 4, you should have had, this is my angle. That means this is the opposite, this is the adjacent, and this is the hypotenuse. But do I need the hypotenuse for this one? No, because all they gave me was these 2. So based off of this, I should be using which trig function? Tangent or TOA, whichever you want to call it. And it's going to be tangent of what angle measure? 55 equals, and if I'm dealing with tangent, it's opposite over adjacent. So I should have x over 8 goes over 1, and we cross multiply. So that should give me 1x equals tangent of 55 times 8. And we get an answer of 11.4. Okay. All right, let's look at number 5. If here is my angle, what do I label the 15? Opposite. What do I label the x? Hypotenuse. It's the opposite of the right angle. Okay. That makes this one the adjacent leg. Okay. So now, if I have an x over here and a 15 over here, am I dealing with sine, cosine, or tangent? Sine, because I have the opposite and I have the hypotenuse. And so I'm going to have sine of 33 equals, how do I set up this trig ratio? In this case, if it's opposite, it's 15 over x. Notice this problem looks different than the previous problems. So I'm going to set this up still over 1. But now, when I'm cross multiplying, notice the x is not by itself. So this is going to give me sine of 33x. Okay? Because if I have, what's 2 times x? 2x. Well, if I have sine of 33 times x, it equals sine of 33x. Then it's going to equal, what is 1 times 15? 15. How do I get x by itself? Not divided by 15, but if I'm trying to get x by itself, I need to divide it by whatever's in front. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide by sine of 33 to both sides. And so these will go away. And then in Desmos, what you're going to type in is 15 divided by sine of 33. So in your calculator, type in 15 divided by sine of 33. And if we're rounding to the nearest tenth, what should we get? 27.5. Okay. So notice when the x is on the bottom, you're going to end up having to divide in your problem. Okay. So let's look at 6. Here is my angle. What do I label the 36? Is that adjacent or is that opposite? This one is adjacent. What is the x labeled? Hypotenuse. And so that means this is opposite. But do I need the opposite right now? No. So if I have an adjacent and a hypotenuse, am I dealing with sine, cosine, or tangent? Cosine, because this is the ka in SOHCAHTOA. So I have cosine of 43, because that's my angle, equals, how do I set up the ratio? Adjacent over hypotenuse, which is 36 over x. Now I put this over 1, and I'm going to cross multiply. So this will give me cosine of 43x equals 1 times 36 is 36. What is the next step? Divide by cosine of 43 to both sides. So if we put that into Desmos, 36 divided by cosine of 43, what do we get as our x value? 49.2. All right, so for number 7, if we were given this angle, what do I label this x? Adjacent. What do I label the 25? Opposite. And then this would technically be your hypotenuse, but I do not need it because there is nothing there. So if I cover this up, which trig function are we using on number 7? Tangent, because I have the opposite and adjacent. So I have tangent of 72 equals, in this case, 25 over x. Divide this by 1. You're going to cross multiply, and you end up with tangent of 72x equals 25. Divide by tangent of 72. And what did we get for x? 8.1. All right, number 8. If this is my angle, what do I label x? Adjacent. What do I label the 11? Hypotenuse. That means this has to be opposite, but I do not need it. Okay. So in this case, if I have an adjacent and a hypotenuse, which trig function am I using? Cosine. So I have cosine of 64 equals. How do I set up this ratio? Is it x over 11 or 11 over x?
X over 11.
X over 11, because it's your adjacent over hypotenuse. So on this problem, did we have to divide or did we have to multiply? Multiply, okay? Because when you cross multiply, notice the x is on top. So I end up with 1x equals cosine of 64 times 11. What did we get for x? 4.8. 4.8. All All right, let's look at these last two problems that are word problems. It says Jake leaned a 12-foot ladder against his house. If the angle formed by the ladder and the ground is 68 degrees, how far from the base of the house did he place the ladder? What shape should I draw?
Right on.
A right triangle. So there's my right triangle. What is this considered in the picture?
A corner.
Okay, yes, it is a corner, but technically this is considered the ground
Oh.
because technically this is my house. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So what does this have to be?
The ladder.
The ladder. Now, how tall is the ladder? 12 feet. So where do I put that 12? The hypotenuse. That is exactly correct. Okay. Now, it did talk about the angle formed by the ladder and the ground is 68. So where am I putting that 68? Up here or down at the bottom? So this is going to be 68 degrees. The question says, how far from the base of the house did he place the ladder? Where's the base? Is the base at the top of the house or the bottom of the house? The bottom of the house. If this is a ladder, that means that should be X. Are we okay? Now, based off of this angle, what would I label this side? Adjacent. What would I label the 12? Hypotenuse. So, am I using sine, cosine, or tangent? If I have the adjacent and the hypotenuse. Cosine. So I have the cosine of what angle? 68 equals, how do I set up the ratio? X over 12. So once again, over 1, you're going to cross multiply. So that's going to give me 1x equals cosine of 68 times 12. And if you put that in Desmos, what does x equal? 4.5. And in this case, we're dealing with feet, and that's your answer. Okay. All right, last one here. A ramp is used to load suitcases on an airplane. What picture do I draw? Okay, well, I can't draw an airplane, so I'm just going to draw a right triangle. Okay. This is technically, if it's at the angle, that's my ramp. What's typically always on the bottom? The ground, right? And then that means that your airplane's somewhere over here. I don't know how to draw an airplane, so just pretend there's an airplane there for the cargo door. Now, it says, if the cargo door is 7 feet from the ground, where do I put the 7? Down here on the ground? Is it the ramp or is it the part above it? Right there. Okay. Then it also says the angle formed by the end of the ramp, there's the end of the ramp, and the ground. So that means in this corner, what do I label? 25. It wants to know how long is the ramp. Well, the ramp is considered what? X, which is your hypotenuse. So based off of the information provided, this is my hypotenuse. What do I label the 7? Opposite. So what trig function am I using? Sine. Okay, sine. So I have sine of 25 equals 7 over x, because it's the opposite over the hypotenuse. That is correct. In this case, because x is in the bottom, we will have to divide. So that's going to give me sine of 25x equals 7. Divide both sides by sine of 25. What does x equal? 16.6 feet. Okay. So be careful when you are labeling based off of the angle given to determine if it's a so, ka, or toa. Okay?